but I do want to point out you currently have other interstellar ships coming toward you at a respectable fraction of the speed of light. They probably don't have enough fuel to stop and go back home, which means they either need to get feet on that planet or set up some type of colony in that system, or they're going to die. That type of mass at that type of speed hitting a planet means death for everyone. Hello and welcome to Entropy Rising, where we talk about science and futurism. I'm your host, Jacob, and of course, I'm joined with my wonderful co host, Lucas. Lucas, how are you doing today?
Doing great today, Jake. Thank you for asking.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
So, today we have an interesting topic. We are going to be recording our third episode on interstellar travel. So, we've done two episodes in the past. The first one, we focused on interstellar propulsion, the types of different drives you would use, how you would actually get to a different star, and
hmm
mostly focused on the physics of it. Our second episode focused on what it would actually be like to be on one of these interstellar ships.
Right.
We talked about the different types of technology you might have available, whether you have life extension or you're able to freeze people and preserve them and wake them up at the end of the journey, or if you just have a traditional generation ship. So, this episode, actually, the third segment of this, we're going to be talking about what you actually do when you reach your target destination. So, what it's going to be like when you start your deceleration phase and how you're actually going to set up that new interstellar colony.
Yeah. It's an exciting topic. We're going to dive into how, they're going to be able to set themselves up and get ready to actually live on that planet and in that entire solar system.
Yeah, or if they would even go to a solar system that doesn't have a habitable planet, which is something people have asked me about
It's
before.
definitely possible.
Yeah. One of the things that we do want to cover actually, because we were talking about would they go to a system without a habitable planet? And specifically, I saw some comments on our threads. Someone asked me the question, what happens if they arrive at the system and they find out that there are no habitable planets, or maybe the planets aren't as habitable as they once thought they would be? To which I want to say, something that is maybe overlooked a lot in science fiction and isn't touched on is that they're not going into these systems blind.
No, no, not with all the prep work that they need to do to be able to get there. You have to think if this is early colonization of entire solar systems, they're going to have a lot of prep work laid out tens, if not hundreds of years prior to their arrival. By using drones and scouting satellites, things like that, they're going to at least have a lay of the land and a confirmation that where they're heading is where they want to be and it's actually worth the journey.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think they're going to send realistically, I mean, you're going to be taking images of the system with telescope, probably even hundreds of years before you send your first ship. You're likely going to send all kinds of automated probes and drones well ahead of your first colony ship to survey the system and make sure it's actually worth the enormous effort you're going to have to put into sending an interstellar ship. And then while that interstellar ship's en route, it's probably also sending a bunch of different drones and surveyors to, again, just go to the system, scout things out, and start making a plan before they ever arrive.
Yeah, if you're going to be launching a mission this ambitious, you need to make sure that it's going to have a high chance of success. And when you think about prep work, most of these star systems that we would be going to, we've already telescoped and mapped out at least the atmosphere composition for a lot of these planets. So prep work has already begun for most of these.
Absolutely. I think you would probably send up drones to start mining asteroids and building up resource banks. And, if you identify planets that are near habitable, you might send drones hundreds, if not thousands of years before you launch your first ship to start the terraforming process before you ever arrive.
Yeah, I mean, like you would want to show up and be able to hit the ground running essentially when you get there because all these people that are taking these ships to arrive there, if they didn't have that infrastructure set up to where they could just get there and start collecting research or building communities, building governments, things like that. If they have to do all that prep work on their own, it's going to actually be thousands of years before they can even start their mission that they originally set out to do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this prep work is not a small task. I mean, just going on the planet and trying to catalog any native life that is there and doing a bioequivalency study to make sure that there's not going to be any harmful pathogens or harmful fungal analogs that are going to immediately kill us when we arrive. That you're talking hundreds of years of works there. You need to catalog an entire biosphere. You need to check with a reasonable level of accuracy almost every different strain of bacteria, of fungus, of virus, and anything you can find to make sure that it's compatible with our biochemistry, or at the bare minimum, so incompatible with our biochemistry that it's not able to infect us. And that alone is going to take probably generations.
Yeah. You just want to make sure that your chance of success is as high as it can be and that in theory, everything will work out. Of course, once you get there, you'll still have to do it in practice, put people on the planet and things could go wrong. But You're trying to minimize the error that you can have and maximize your efficiency once you arrive in that system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most of this is going to be starting, like I said, before you launch your first ship. I imagine you've probably already sent countless drones to the system, both for surveying and prep work, but also whether it's a generation ship or a ship that's carrying frozen crew or whatever. That ship is probably also launching a bunch of different drones and automated systems before it begins its deceleration phase
Mhm.
so that they can carry on to the system because these drones don't need to have the same amount of mass as your ship, so they can decelerate much later.
I mean, that's actually a really cool point because if the ship itself is carrying drones that can set up the next phase, a colony ship's deceleration phase could last hundreds of years. So if it propels those drones at that same speed, they could reach the system hundreds or maybe even thousands of years prior to the ship even arriving.
Oh, absolutely. They can withstand higher levels of thrust, and they're just so much smaller compared to the generation ship, which is going to be gigantic. I mean, this
Hmm.
is essentially a city in space. It needs to have a slow, gradual deceleration. These drones, they can really just wait till they get to the system and slam on the brakes and be absolutely fine.
Yeah. So, I mean, would just make sense at that point because you're essentially making an entire package that you're sending to this solar system to colonize it. By launching those drones right before your deceleration, you are able to set up all that infrastructure without having to worry about launching the drones separately.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're talking about the deceleration phase, also, I know a lot of times in fiction and even in some stories, it's read as a flip and burn, similar to what you see in The Expanse, where they are accelerating halfway and at the middle doing a flip and then decelerating the other half of the way.
Hmm.
And that does work. That is the fastest way to get somewhere. It is also just insanely inefficient as far as fuel goes. And when you're talking about interstellar colony ships, right? Typically, the biggest constraint we have is fuel. How much fuel can you carry? So I actually think that method, unless you just have some insane technology, something maybe like we see in Revelation space, where their ships don't follow the rocket equation, they don't have to carry fuel on board.
I mean, that would be amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they have microscopic wormholes that they open into a primordial galaxy that's still like in its Big Bang phase, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that would be great. If we were at that point, though, I think,
Yeah,
sorry, that wouldn't even be a problem.
absolutely not.
Just
So,
unlimited energy.
yeah. So, if you're on a rocket, anything following the rocket equation, then I think it's unlikely you're going to have the fuel reserve to accelerate for half the trip and then decelerate the other half of the trip. I think it's much more likely you'll have a brief acceleration phase at the beginning and then a brief deceleration phase at the end with a lot of drifting in between.
Yeah. And I mean, contrary to a lot of belief, there are small particles in space. So you will slow down gradually as the ship moves, but you will have to expend fuel eventually to slow yourself back down because that would take millions of years to slow you to a stop.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we're not really discussing it so much in this episode. We already did an episode on the physics behind interstellar travel. But in my own opinion, I think one of the best ways to do interstellar travel is to have some type of a hybrid system where you're using a solar cell with a pusher laser from your
Mhm.
home system. And then you're using nuclear fusion, or if you have it, antimatter to slow you down when you reach the system.
Yeah.
Because this halves the amount of fuel you have to carry, which eliminates a lot of mass from your ship, and it lets you slow down when you reach your target destination. There are ways you can use pusher lasers to slow down at your target destination without having one set up at the target. The only downside is that system involves having a solar cell that's larger than the Earth. So, not, definitely a compromise there.
I mean, if we're traveling from solar system to solar system, it might be in the realm of possibility.
Yeah, it's definitely not impossible, especially when you're talking about the feat of mega engineering you need for any type of interstellar travel.
Hmm.
But I do particularly like the system of using a solar cell while you're leaving your system and then some type of traditional propulsion to slow down once you arrive at your destination. Another option, too, is you can send automated drones beforehand to build an interstellar laser at the target destination, and you can use solar cells both ways.
Now, see, that seems much more feasible to
Yeah.
me. I feel like that would be more efficient for the drones to carry small amounts of hydrogen fuel once launched, making the main O'Neill cylinder ship lighter to then be able to slow down easier once the drones deploy a orbital laser from, the planet or wherever they're firing it from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think typically I tend to imagine they would be orbiting. It'd be almost like a Dyson swarm type situation, either redirecting the light from that star or collecting it to power a laser.
Yeah. When a laser fires, it doesn't produce any kind of backwards
It
thrust.
does.
It does?
It does, yeah.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, so I feel like it would have to be in orbit.
Yeah, yeah. Newton's a cruel bitch, yeah. You're not getting around his laws of motion, so equal and opposite forces, no matter even lasers, yeah, they also provide thrust.
Crazy.
If you were in space, you could take a laser pointer and point it and use it to push yourself around.
That's so cool.
I mean, you're talking about, like, you know, millions of newtons of thrust or billions of newtons of thrust depending on the laser, but it technically does push you.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's awesome. I learned something
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, these lights lighting up our faces right now are actually putting thrust on us.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, that's something you can do as part of, like, setting up the system before you arrive. So, needless to say, there's a lot of preparatory work that's gonna be done before the colonists ever even show up in the system.
Yeah, I mean, we have drones that are going to be building that space infrastructure that they'll need to have set up to get their mission done. We'll probably also have robotics on the ground, terraforming the planet, making sure that everything is good, getting samples, making sure that there's no foreign types of bacteria or fungal or anything that could harm organics.
Yeah, which honestly makes me wonder what type of planet we would want to see in a system like this, or if we would even be willing to go to a system that doesn't have a planet. A lot of times we imagine the perfect system would have an Earth-like planet
Mhm.
that has life very similar to ours, but in some ways that actually might be a bad thing. The more similar the life is to us, the more likely it is to be able to infect us and wreak havoc on our own like crops that we're bringing and animals that we're bringing. In some ways it might be better to find a planet that has the potential to support human life, maybe has a similar atmosphere to us, maybe just missing the oxygen, the right mass, but it hasn't yet sprouted life. And that would
Right.
save you the trouble of trying to do a bioequivalency study or worst case scenario, finding out the life on that planet's very toxic and hostile toward us.
Yeah, I mean, when you say that, I know that we've talked a lot about how honestly it's just better to live on our new cylinders on orbital habitats. So realistically, if we're going to a system for something, I feel like it's going to be for a rare type of resource. And so maybe like a nebula type system that has like exotic gases that haven't been formed in the stars yet, harvesting those. But landing on an area that might have alien life on it already, I feel like it would be strictly for research purposes.
Very possible, yeah. I mean, it's a huge discovery, right?
Mhm.
Definitely could see you going there for research purposes. You're going to want to catalog all that. We always think about colonizing these planets when we find them, but once you colonize it, you're going to start altering that biosphere and maybe even destroying a lot of it.
Mhm.
So it is very possible you might quarantine this planet. And I think that's going to come down to how rare are these planets and what are the benefits of colonizing them. On one hand, if it's rare, it's a better opportunity to study. You might only get one option for it, but also it's a more valuable resource, right? This is the only planet we found that can support our type of life. We're going to want to colonize it. This might be the only one that we're able to get to.
I know, but just think of the first one, right? So we find an Earth-like planet, like it matches all the criteria of our Earth-like planet.
Hmm.
Now, it has two possibilities. Either there is life or there isn't.
Hmm.
And we'll want to research both of those.
True.
Why is there not life? If everything is the same and all the conditions are the same on our planet, because that puts a dent in like our last episode, the rare earth theory. Because if there is an earth and there isn't life, then is life rarer than we think it is already? Or if there is life, of course, we want to study the first signs of life that we've ever found out
Yeah,
there. So,
absolutely. But then, where you're also fighting is that human urge to expand and colonize and put feet on the ground everywhere. It'll be interesting to see, but I definitely could see us putting boots on the ground, even if we really shouldn't ethically. But I definitely think we might. That being said, though, it might be better to find a planet that either has no life, but is almost what we want, so it's easy to terraform, or a planet that has such completely different life we don't have to worry about bioequivalency and it being able to their version of bacteria being able to survive in our bodies, because that is also not good.
no.
But speaking of all this, something else that I don't think science fiction can really cover,
Mhm.
and this isn't a critique at science fiction, it's really hard to grasp the scope of what's going on in an entire solar system. I mean, most works of fiction can't even really show more than one or two settings inside of a planet, much less an entire solar system.
Right.
But you're not just colonizing a planet, you are colonizing this entire new solar system.
Yeah.
I mean, this means you're doing asteroid mining. You're likely setting an outpost on other planets or other moons that might not be your main target, but you're wanting to study them or maybe mine them for precious resources.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think if you're setting up an entire space infrastructure in a solar system for a planet, you're going to want to mine resources in the most efficient way possible. So that would be asteroid mining. For gases, you could go onto small rocky planets or even into gas giants and harvest those resources from there. And then, of course, you would want to research any kind of anomalies, things that we're not used to, that we haven't been able to observe from close up in our solar system, that we would then want to start doing there. So you're going to have little outposts and new habitats going all around, that entire solar system, however big it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're gonna have all types of different space habitats. You're probably not building full-on O'Neill cylinders to begin with because you need the population density to support that, and
Mhm.
you likely don't have that when you're first beginning. O'Neill cylinders are very large habitats, kinda like settling a new city and immediately building a skyscraper, right? Doesn't really
Right.
make sense. But your colony ship is essentially an O'Neill cylinder, so that'll probably be a base of operations for a very long time
Mhm.
while you build smaller research outposts and things like that.
Yeah.
And you might even start building, like I said, orbital solar collectors to just power everything you're doing, maybe even power the bases you're going to put on or around the planet. And also, potentially, if you're the first person arriving to the system, part of your contract might be setting up an orbital laser to slow down other incoming ships that are coming after you if you didn't have robots do that before you arrived.
Right.
Yeah, so it is really important to think, the space habitation is going to start immediately and definitely going to precede the planetary habitation.
Yeah, I mean, you would definitely need to get all of that set up, like we said before, because going down and terraforming this planet and however you're going to have to be doing it is going to be very, very intensive on resources. And like you said, it's not going to have a lot of manpower behind it. It'll be a lot of robots that have been setting up all this stuff already for hundreds of years, but you're going to be setting the groundwork for what's going to be a solar system entirely populated
Yeah,
at one point.
absolutely. And I think we see this in science fiction, right? Your colony ships arrives at the system and people immediately hop out, boots on the ground, which is not at all going to happen.
No, no, but it is a lot more dramatic that way.
Oh yeah, I mean, who wants to read a book where they spend, we spent 5 decades getting here, and now we're or 500 years getting here, and now we're going to spend another 200 years in orbit, right? That's not very interesting. And I think that's an extreme example, but realistically, you're probably going to spend decades, if not maybe even centuries, before you step on that planet, just trying to catalog everything and make sure it's safe. And you're going to focus on setting up your orbital infrastructure around that planet well before you ever try to build the first settlement.
Yeah. I mean, you could follow the lucky few that'll get sent from the ship to go down and investigate the planet, but yeah, like you said, it would not be like and also the whole ship is not going to land on the planet either. I know a lot of science fiction says that, but if it tried to enter gravity, it would never come back out again.
Yeah, it's a crazy prospect actually to try to build a ship that's both capable of interstellar travel and landing on a planet. And
Yeah.
it's so inefficient. There's just
No,
no way.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just unnecessary too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the same way like with how ships are. There would be some kind of docking port, but if not, you would just take smaller ships down to the planet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, your ship is probably going to serve as a base of operation for a very long time. It's essentially going to be the biggest space station in your system for potentially again centuries while
Hmm.
you're building up your population, and it's going to be probably the center of the government for that system for
Oh
the
yeah.
foreseeable future.
Exactly. Like it's not going to be a ship anymore once it gets there. Its life as a ship is over. It becomes a space station at that point.
Probably, but there is also the possibility that people might choose to, once everything's set up and running smooth, refuel the ship and move on to another destination. That's kind of the idea behind a gardener ship.
Man, that would be crazy. Imagine. Yeah, we've had 40 generations to get here, but now who wants to do it again?
It's possible though, it's if you've had so long on a ship, you might not want to leave. There's this idea always with colony ships that people are like itching to get off. But this is their world. They've grown up in it. Even without sending the ship onto a new star, it's very likely a good chunk of your population is going to say, "No, we don't want to go on the planet. We're just going to stay in the ship. We like this very much. It's luxurious. You guys have fun on your whole new planet that's trying to kill you in every way possible."
Yeah, no, I mean that's fair, and it all ties back around to planets kind of suck. But if it now, I'm thinking they might not have a choice if their great grandparents volunteered for their generations to be on this ship, but they signed them into a contract. Let's say that this was launched by a corporation to set up an infrastructure there and go onto that planet for whatever reason, then they might not have a choice.
It's possible, but I don't think you're going to need people in space to set up a bunch of stuff anyways and to provide logistical support. And I don't think you're going to end up with a situation where no one wants to go down.
Mhm.
And I think it's just in general a bad idea to try to force a population to do something, even if there
Yeah.
was a contract signed 1,000 years ago on a planet that no one remembers.
Well, they wouldn't be forcibly, they would be brainwashed hundreds of years
Okay.
prior
I see. I see.
for the good of the ship.
Of course, that's also assuming a generation ship model, which might not be. We
Yeah.
have talked about the possibility of extreme life extension where people can live thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, or of course, cryopreservation or any other type of preservation, where for a lot of people, they might not have even been awake for the journey.
Yeah, I mean, if it was cryopreservation, I feel like that would be the most efficient because everybody would wake up with the same mindset, assuming it was a volunteer journey, would wake up with the same mindset that they had when they went to sleep.
Yeah, and I definitely think if you have any type of preservation like that, interstellar colonization becomes so much easier.
Yeah.
And I know I've talked about it before, but freezing people, there's no such thing as cryopreservation, right? What you're doing is you're freezing somebody and killing them. You just have the technology to wake them from the dead afterwards because it destroys every cell in your body.
Yeah.
So if you have cryopreservation, you also have extreme life extension.
Hmm. Yeah, but it's just like a more efficient way, is you can't be bored if you're dead.
That is true, yes. This is an ultimate time passer. But that being said, let's say we actually do get to this planet. We're good to go. There's nothing on the planet that's immediately going to kill us, and
Mhm.
we want to set up our settlement. How do you think that's going to play out? I'm curious.
Well, it depends, right? Was the settlement to be brought out by, a government to extend that government or for scientific purposes for that entire planet? Or was it a corporation that had it sent out for resource collection? I mean, it would work out a lot of different ways, I feel like. But once people land, of course, I think that they'll start with one colony, right? That way they can kind of like build up an infrastructure to branch out. But once they start branching out, I feel like it'll be a lot like, settling the West back when the United States did it, like unclaimed territory, the new frontier. People will go out, claim pieces of land for themselves to build up, but they'll still have to follow the laws that are set by first the ship and then the government that moved down to the planet. I believe that that's how it would probably work out the most likely way.
I could see that. Although, to be fair, something I don't think I've emphasized yet is I actually don't think you would probably send one ship. I think even in your initial wave of colonization, you're probably sending a fleet of ships with more ships following behind. So it is very possible that you might start with one settlement, or it might be one settlement per ship, one settlement per entity that sent these ships. There's all kinds of different ways you can do that. But it is possible, even the first wave of colonization, you might have multiple settlements if you sent more than one ship.
Now, that is interesting, but in that, we would be assuming that there was enough resource on Earth for multiple different entities to want to send ships out to a planet to colonize it for different reasons, right?
That's true.
Under different governments. I just feel like in order for this to be possible, it would have to be either an entire planet's effort or an incredibly powerful corporation effort.
Like the Dutch East India Company of Space.
Exactly. Yeah, because there's no other way that you can fund it. You either have to fund it by, combining all of the planet or government wise, because no government's going to fund that project solo. And definitely, I don't think all these different governments at the same exact time are going to be like, okay, we're all going to this same Earth like planet out in this system for the same reason and we're all going to cooperate. I feel like that would be anarchy because people are not going to like people with other prerogatives once they get there, and it's going to cause issues before they even land on the planet.
Okay. I actually have a bit of a different point of view, to be honest with you. For one, I don't think that you're sending even a single interstellar colony ship without being at a point of your civilization of extreme abundance. I mean, this is such an energy intensive project that it's not something you're going to do half heartedly, right?
Hmm.
I think you must be at a point where you can afford to throw just basically unlimited resources down the toilet. I mean, you've probably got a good chunk of a Dyson swarm done, and you consider this a pretty small project on the grand scheme of things. And in
Hmm.
this kind of instance, I do think that you actually might be able to have several different entities fund this because it is extremely expensive once the technology and the resources are right. And I kind of in my head think of it more like the space race that we saw back in, of course, the early 20th century, and kind of seeing a resurgence of it now, which is that when the conditions and times are right for one person to be able to do it, everyone wants to do it, and you kind of get this race to do it for prestige or for whatever reason that you want.
Interesting. I see your point there, but if this is a smaller undertaking, if we've already built a Dyson swarm, you don't think that we would have unified government? Or because in order to take on projects like that, I feel like a single entity would already be ruling over like we would have to come together as a species to be able to achieve such greatness in my mind.
I personally don't think so, actually. I think quite the opposite. You're going to have people just fracturing and splintering, but you have to think of it in terms of scale. Right now, we have 8 billion people. If you have 800 billion people, you could have a tiny subset of your population interested in sending a colony ship that amounts to more people than on Earth right now. The productivity of those people could be huge, even if they're percentage-wise a very small subset.
That is actually an interesting point. You could have little subsectors, or even like it could be go in the opposite direction of what I thought, and it could be even smaller fracturings of government than what we have now.
Yeah, just all kinds of little groups, especially when you're talking about colonizing an entire solar system.
Yeah.
But
Okay. So, I mean, in that case, then my only problem with that is if we have the ability to go out there, why does everybody want the same system? I feel like it would be achievable to reach other Earth like planets unless they're actually that rare.
yeah, there's two possibilities the way I see it. Either obviously the closer systems are going to want to be settled first.
Mhm.
If you can, you don't want to go further than needed, especially considering how long these voyages will take. So obviously, you're going to have a few prime targets that you want to send people to. And then the second option is just that the closest system with the right conditions is going to be a target for everyone, unless Earth like planets or habitable planets are just insanely common. I think it's very possible you're going to have one ideal target that everyone wants to go to.
Okay. I feel like that would become. I mean, it would be difficult once everybody got there. It would not be easy setting up. I mean, you'd have to set up different boundaries, mapping out the planet for whatever the reason why that ship had to come, but maybe that interjects with the reason of another one. Like, how do you get that all set up? And you need to get that all set up before you even land. It's like dividing up a map before you even land on the planet.
Which you very well might do. I mean, you also have an entire planet to play around with. This is not a small amount of area. Earth has around, what, 200 different countries? So you can definitely have completely different entities claiming land and working together. Of course, there might be some friction, but, there's all kinds of different ways you can set it up. And it is a lot of land. And it's kind of hard to imagine someone trying to lay dibs to it all because, like I said, it's just a lot. Even if you can put 10,000 people on a ship and send 100 ships, it's still going to take you countless generations to fill up that whole planet. It's going to take you thousands of years, maybe not, maybe even tens of thousands of years to even get close to the population we have just on Earth.
You cannot underestimate the ambition of greed.
I mean, that is true.
Like people will happily claim that entire planet for their ship.
That is true, but you need to be able to defend your claim.
Of course, yeah, maybe small wars will ensue because I doubt that everybody's gonna hold hands and sing kumbaya and be
Yeah.
like, "Okay, you can have that spot."
I am a very optimistic person, but yeah, even I tend not to go that far and think everyone's going to magically work together in the future. But yeah, no, you do need to defend your claim. Of course, you can come down with your 10,000 people and say, this is our planet. And you might even try to build some weaponry to defend that. But I do want to point out you currently have other interstellar ships coming toward you at a respectable fraction of the speed of light. They probably don't have enough fuel to stop and go back home, which means they either need to get feet on that planet or set up some type of colony in that system, or they're going to die. That type of mass at that type of speed hitting a planet means death for everyone.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. It just loops us back around to the, just the fear of mutual destruction.
Exactly. So, yes, you very well could show up on the planet and say, this is ours. Good luck. Not to mention, you've also got people back on Earth, which, mind you, compared to your planet, is a technological powerhouse. I mean, they have the ability to send generation ships. They might not take too kindly to you turning down their new ship coming at you. And if you're hostile to any new ships coming in, they might rightfully conclude that you're going to be a hostile colony. And it's better to deal with you now than to give you hundreds, if not thousands of years to develop and try to start a war with them down the road. So if you show any acts of aggression, the whole planet of Earth might say, yeah, we need to do something about this now before it grows into a bigger problem.
And, talking about all this, it actually stresses me out a little thinking about how all these different massive like feats of engineering flying towards this planet, and they're just like, do we divide it up when we get there? Because it's too far away to really think about who's getting what. Oh man. It's no, it's crazy, but you're right. Once you get down to it, all these ships could land all their people on the planet. Let's say that 100 ships showed up. They could land every single person on that planet, and there would be more space than they would know what to do with. Everybody could have hundreds of miles. So yeah, I mean, it's petty, but humanity as it is right now is petty, and that's how I have to think that they'll be.
And I think those are fair questions to ask to be like, that's a reasonable stance to take is to wonder how that'll work. Cause I think people tend to be naturally good, but can also be greedy. And, that being said, when they do get there, I think settling won't be so bad. We're already pretty good at prefabrication now. Give that a couple thousand more years. Chances are these colony ships can put down and build entire towns and cities within weeks, if not months.
Oh yeah, people they'll go right back to however people are living on Earth. Maybe give them 10 years and they'll be entirely caught up with the technology and the infrastructure that they would need.
Oh, absolutely.
I guarantee that if we're making this trip already.
Oh yeah, if you have the technology to interstellar travel, chances are these aren't going to be people roughing it in the outback. They're probably going to have a better quality of life than many of us on Earth have currently.
Yeah, and it'll be really their main issue is just going to be setting up a power generation grid like what they have in our current system, or what would be their current system, like building another Dyson swarm, for example,
Yeah,
and getting that power set up to orbital habitats, and then like infrastructure from the planet back into space, things like that.
absolutely. But I mean, when you're talking about the power needed to move a ship to a new star, that's enough power to run a respectable size civilization while you're getting other things set up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think many of them will have a better quality of life than we currently have. And of course, they will start trying to build things, maybe even the baby stages of a Dyson swarm again. I do think that's a natural progression for free power. Although, if they have fusion, that might not be the case. They might just mine their nearest gas giant and plop down fusion reactors on the planet, and that could power their civilization for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well like you're already taking on one massive undertaking. I really only see them building the Dyson swarm once they get to the point that they need that
Yeah.
power to start, powering those orbital habitats that would probably be orbiting that star.
And of course, we covered this in our Dyson Swarm episode. When you mentioned building a Dyson Swarm, some people roll their eyes like that's such a huge thing. Why would anyone do it? But it's no different than trying to cover the Earth with solar panels. It's not like you make one project that's going to cover the Earth in solar panels, right? You have a bunch of different groups who build them as they need them, and over time, you end up being like, wow, we've covered most of this in solar panels, and that's
Hmm.
how I think Dyson Swarms work too. You just build orbital collectors as needed to grow with your civilization. You're not going up and trying to do this all in one go.
No, yeah, and really, the only big reason why I see that they would need that early on is if, like you said before, they're trying to send those ships that showed up off on another journey to the next nearest star.
Yeah.
Then maybe they would need that energy source either from refining it from a gas giant or from storing power in large battery capacitors from a Dyson swarm.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think this planet would actually be very nice. I think you could set things up really quick. As for the government, I mostly think you would probably set up your government before you ever left your home system.
Yeah, it's like whatever government you were following on the ship, obviously it worked. Everybody didn't kill each other on there. You had something stable enough and people follow orders and law well enough to be able to arrive at a planet thousands of years later. Why not just adopt that on the planet and then adjust the laws as needed to fit with that new type of community?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're speaking of adjusting these laws to fit things as needed, and which I'm glad you kind of brought that up because that's not the only thing that's going to adjust over time. If you're so far away from Earth and you're so disconnected, you're going to have also genetic and cultural drift as well.
Oh, that's actually an interesting topic. Yeah, you see that in a lot of science fiction. People who go to a different type of planet that might have a slightly different atmosphere, slightly different gravity, different kinds of needs that will fall into them. We are living creatures that will evolve to better fit our environment. Even though we make artificial environments for ourselves, we still do follow that chain of may the best survive,
Yeah,
right?
and even if you have the exact same environment, you still have something called like the founder effect, where the genetic population of the people who show up is a subset of the entire genetic population of Earth. And there might be some biases there just by random chance. Some genes might be overrepresented in that population, and then that's going to kickstart genetic drift.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But to be honest with you, I think the cultural drift would be a bigger issue than genetic drift. The only reason being is that I think by this point in time, you probably have fairly advanced cybernetics and you're able to customize your body almost to be whatever you want, maybe even be just an artificially uploaded mind. So the genetic drift doesn't concern me too much. We can probably edit our genetics at this point.
Mm.
But the cultural drift, I think, would be a lot more tricky.
Yeah, the cultural drift would be exponential. Now, just thinking about one ship and however long that journey took, whether it was hundreds or thousands of years, they're probably speaking a very different language than they did when they left Earth. They're probably having very different customs. And even like just how a lot of humans nowadays, we love to be out in nature. They might find comfort and solace around weird things like bio printed food. So they all sit around and, hang out with the bio printer like things like that. It's unfathomable because culture just works that way, but it's going to be different. And if you have hundreds of ships coming there, they're all going to be speaking different languages from each other, and they're all going to have different customs that then be bringing down to this planet. But then those customs will change over, the tens, hundreds of years. Things will have to be different to live on a planet, and people will find comfort in those things, and that will create culture.
Absolutely. Actually, speaking of that, I know this is going more back to the colony ships themselves, but this is why I tend to imagine having a fleet of ships that you can travel in between because that gives you a large lump of ships that have a shared culture. And I think you'll actually have like almost a cultural gradient from your system to Earth, where every ship that's along its journey between Earth and your new system is in contact with the ships before and after it, sharing their culture and all that. So you might end up with a situation of, Fleet A has its own set culture, but it's sharing that with Fleet B and all the way back to Earth of just this gradient of culture leaning toward your new system.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds great.
Well, overall, I think this is an interesting topic to cover. I think we'll probably be covering a lot more interstellar episodes overall, but this does kind of make a nice trio of how the ships work, how the journey will be, and how it'll be once you get there.
Yeah, I definitely love this. Like interstellar travel just on its own is such a beautiful concept in my mind. Like I love that. But being able to take a deep dive into the colonization of systems and planets has been really a treat because it's something that I feel like is achievable, maybe not in our lifetimes, but in the near future.
Absolutely. Well, next week, we're going to be covering stellar engines and stellar mining. So, if you're interested in hearing about how we might turn our entire solar system into an interstellar spaceship, or potentially just mine our own sun and make it live longer in the process, the next episode will be for you. Please consider following us on Threads or supporting us on Patreon if you feel so inclined, and see you in the next episode.
See you soon, guys.